Hey guys, Brook here. This is the 20th of November 2018, and this week, the Honourable Prime Minister of the UK, Theresa May, put forth her draft proposal for the Brexit exit that I believe happens on the 29th of March 2019, so not too far away. And I thought I would just share a little bit about my views and some of the conversations I've had with people out here concerning Brexit and Theresa May and her recent speech. Now, I know this is a complicated issue. I definitely, I would come down on the leave side of this equation. I couldn't actually vote in the referendum because I hadn't actually lived in the UK long enough to get registered to vote and get onto the voting rolls. But had I been, I definitely would have voted to leave. I believe in national sovereignty. I believe in controlling your laws as well as your currency and these other things. And as a libertarian, I believe that the power of government needs to be as close to those being governed in order to be held accountable and to actually hear the needs of the people and address it. And the relationship that Brussels has had with the UK has not been very fruitful. The UK has not really been able to influence very much out of the European Parliament. Um, it's been a difficult situation. David Cameron tried to get more concessions and basically sway the EU to align more with what he thought the British people needed, and he failed. And that is part of the reason why we ended up with this referendum. But nonetheless, I wanted to touch a little bit about Theresa May and her recent speech. Anybody who hasn't seen it, I will put links to it below. You can watch the entire speech. I'm not going to get into all the question times and stuff like that. You could look for that on yourself. So yeah, in this video, I wanted to focus a little bit about Theresa May's speech in the House of Commons. I will put links down below if anybody wants to see her speech on this matter. There's a lot of doublespeak that she's put into it, which I thought was very interesting for anybody who's listening to it. She talks about how her deal fulfills certain points of the Brexit referendum. So she's basically saying, well, the Brexit meant we stop the free movement of people, we control our borders, we control our money, we do this. So she uses this phrase, we've delivered on these points of Brexit. So she doesn't say that she's delivered on Brexit. She just says that we've delivered on these points, right? And the other side of her doublespeak is that she's introduced an entirely new concept called the national interest. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, there was a democratic vote to determine what the national interest was, and it was called Brexit. So you've dovetailed, she's dovetailed this other thing into, which apparently was not attached to the referendum, completely subjective. I guess it's her own opinion, and it gives her the right to basically pick and choose certain things that she believes are in the national interest. These were things that were not voted on and other things like that. Such things, she says that, her deal delivers on protecting jobs. Now, it is not the government's job to protect jobs. In fact, that was a very big part of the problem with the EU, in that it was basically a giant trade bloc protecting European jobs from outside innovations out of the US and Asia and all these other types of things. Nothing could really come in. There was quotas and tariffs used to stem competition and basically keep jobs, right, and keep wages high for farmers and other people. And well, they don't really have tech companies in the EU anymore. They've all been regulated out. But it was basically a protectionist racket. So basically, Theresa May is basically saying that she's going to continue that protectionist racket by taking policy positions to protect jobs. Now, I'm fully aware that the British farmer is going to be facing a lot of challenges if we, get rid of all the tariffs and remove all the trading blocks, because there's cheaper food coming out of the US, sometimes out of China and other places, Australia, New Zealand, and these places. So yeah, the British farmer is going to have to compete on a global scale when it comes to food, and it's going to put pressure on prices, or downward pressure on prices and wages and other things. It's going to be good for the British consumer because we get more choice, cheaper clothes, cheaper food, not necessarily better quality, but that's a whole other story. But it is going to put pressure on British farmers. So for the government to step into this and try to intervene market forces to protect jobs, I don't think that's necessarily in the national interest. That's in the political interest, because states always want people to be employed. They want to protect jobs because they want to hire the electorate, and hopefully whoever they protect is going to vote for that particular party because, they think they'll keep their job. But that's not really the role of government, but it appears to be, at least in the UK. There are also busybodies on the issue of trade. Now, look, we do not actually need trade agreements. People are buying and selling all over the world. You could buy things from the US, Canada, Mexico, all these countries while in the UK, and we don't have trade agreements with any of these countries. We now have a Canadian trade agreement through the EU and stuff like that. But you can buy something anywhere in the world. So this idea that you need a trade agreement, it's a political argument, because politicians like to say, oh, we've negotiated some kind of trade agreement and stuff like that. But people have been trading for centuries without any kind of trade agreements, like at the government level. So again, these are political, phrases and political speak. It's good to have free trade agreements. I'm not opposed to that, but at the same time, they're not absolutely necessary. This idea that if we don't have them all, we're going to have a shortage of insulin and we're going to have a shortage of food and all this other nonsense. It's just fear mongering at its worst. And on my final point of this, a lot of people, when I went out to one of the Brexit marches, a lot of people were shouting at us in the crowd that we were racist and xenophobic, and basically asking where are we going to get all the doctors and nurses that we need for the NHS. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the NHS comprises of about 6% EU residents. The bulk of it, I think 86%, is British nationals. And the next biggest demographic of that, of course, is people from the Caribbean, Asia, India, Bangladesh, and all these other places. So, and there's nothing to say that we cannot import EU medical professionals through the same visas that we let people in from the Caribbean and the Philippines and everywhere else. This idea that, we leave Brexit and suddenly all these doctors are going to vanish is preposterous, right? It's just fear-mongering and all this other types of things. All of the things that the Ramonas have been screaming about, that, we're going to have a shortage of this, have a shortage of that, we're flight of people, or whatever the case might be, is nonsense. Every country around the world has an immigration policy. Every country around the world imports what they need. So there's no reason why we can't have a points-based system like Australia and a lot of these other countries to deal with the needs of the economy. There's a lot to say about, bringing in, low-skilled workers and how that suppresses the wages and stuff like that. But I don't want this video to go on for too long. But I just thought it was very interesting, her use of language. And there are some things I haven't read the entire draft. It's a very big thing. I've read some commentaries on it. There's a back and forth going on between the Spectator and 10 Downing Street. So I think we're on the rebuttal of the 40 scary things that are in this trade deal and so forth. So this is going to be going on for a little while. And on a final point, I'm not afraid of a no Brexit. There are a lot of countries that don't have trade deals and don't have all these other types of things, and they participate in the global economy just fine. And with that said, if you disagree with me, that's absolutely fine. I have a lot of friends who do disagree with me. One of my Italian friends, he says that the attitude in Italy is that if it weren't for the EU, Italian politicians would screw up the country even worse. So they see the EU as a backstop from, I guess some of the worst parts of Italian politics. I don't know much about that. So they have a very different opinion. I can respect that. I agree that, the European Convention on Human Rights is probably at least the closest thing that we have to a constitution out here in the UK. But my feeling on this is, look, we need a constitution here written for, the British people. The European Convention on Human Rights, every clause has another clause attached to it, basically says this could be voided at any point by our politicians. So that I don't really think that holds a lot of water. But once we're done dealing with Brexit and we get Brussels off our back, we have to address the issue of Parliament and their ability to basically write laws. We do not have a codified constitution out here. I think that is the next big campaign out here in the UK. So yeah, I'm not saying that it's not going to be difficult. I'm not saying it's not going to be hard. There are going to be challenges, but I have a lot of faith in the British people. At one point, this nation, ruled a better part of 1/5 of the world. You cannot tell me that governing, this island and Northern Ireland is that difficult. That we just have to throw our hands up and surrender to Brussels. You're not going to convince me of that. I have a lot of faith in the British people. I have a lot of faith in British ingenuity and all of these things. So I am very optimistic. And I think the fallout from this will be if Britain actually does very well outside of the EU, you might see a lot of other member states looking to get out. And this might very well signal the end of the European project. Not the end of Europe, we're not going anywhere, but definitely the end of the EU. It's possible. So it's going to be very exciting over the next few years. As always, if you like this, be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Disagree? Put a comment below. We can have the discussion. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Take care.